Let's take a look at the Subscription Advantage Pack for Autodesk Mudbox 2011 in action and see how it can make an impact on the work you do.
Hello, my name is Craig Barr, and I'm going to show you the new things you can do with the Subscription Advantage Pack for Autodesk Mudbox 2011. The first feature we'll take a look at is the ability to work with multiple joints. Artists can now choose between placing single joints at a time or multiple joints, resulting in a joint hierarchy. We've added several features and enhancements to the Mudbox posing toolset. The weighting tool now has the ability to flood weights across the surface as well as a normalize function. Let's go back to the joint creation tool. As you can see, we have added a mirroring function to the joint creation process. So this allows for the rapid creation of symmetrical joints. For example, in this character's legs here, I can quickly build a joint hierarchy that is mirrored across to the other side. The joint hierarchies can be created automatically based on the influenced vertices. We've also added this functionality to the Move Pivot tool, allowing you to quickly mirror the pivot of the joints, as I'm doing here with these feet. The joint information is stored in a hierarchy in the object list as a skeleton. Joints can be accessed individually in here. I'm actually just going to go ahead and delete this hierarchy. Let's take a look at some of the other additions to the Create Joint tool. Under the Placement menu, artists now have the option between using the default internal placement setting, or they can choose to lay joints across a surface. The joints will follow the contour of the surface, allowing for different deformation or sculpting effects. Another menu option in the Create Joint tool is the Weights menu. There are now 4 choices for the creation of joint weights. None, allowing for manual weighting, Automatic, the default weighting setting, Topology, based on the topology under your cursor, and Click and Paint, where you are prompted to paint weights after each joint is placed. Another addition to the posing tool set are pose presets. You can work with multiple poses non-destructively with the new ability to store joint transforms as presets. This enables you to sculpt at different poses and to have these sculptural changes carry across from one pose to the next, deforming correctly in the space of each pose. Let's take a look at some of the enhancements to the texture painting workflow in the Subscription Advantage Pack for Mudbox 2011. We've added 22 new layer blend modes. This brings the Mudbox layer blending in line with Adobe Photoshop and greatly increases the painting workflow between the two applications. A new opacity channel is now available that allows for the simulation of semi-transparent or transparent materials. Of course, multiple layers of opacity can be painted, as well as composited using the 27 layer blend presets, just like any other channel. In the viewport filters, artists now have 2 choices for ambient occlusion. The new ambient occlusion filter produces a much softer fall off and provides much more control. The previous ambient occlusion now exists as a cavity ambient occlusion filter, producing effects that darken cracks, crevices, and any kind of point of contact on real-time rendered surfaces. We have also enhanced the baking of ambient occlusion in texture map extraction. Now artists can bake ambient occlusion between multiple arbitrary objects, even where the source meshes have no UVs. By defining several source and target meshes, we can obtain the ambient occlusion data on one map. This is useful for overlapping objects on a character, like backpacks, ammo packs, or armor. Let's take a look at a map baked out based on surrounding objects on this chest plate. And I have an ambient occlusion map here that I am multiplying. So you can see that we have all of the ambient occlusion based off of the other objects that were overlapping this chest plate. Another exciting new feature available in the Subscription Advantage Pack for Autodesk Mudbox 2011 is the ability to extract PTEX maps. Extracted ambient occlusion, vector displacement, and normal maps can now be exported as PTEX files to take advantage of cutting-edge technology for UV-less texture mapping. These maps can be rendered onto the original mesh in PTEX-supported renderers with accurate results. The PTEX library has been released as open source and is now included with Pixar's RenderMan software. In this example, we are seeing a rendering from RenderMan that is completely utilizing PTEX to accurately reproduce the sculpt and paint details. So here you can see we have a high-resolution mesh that is about 3.5 million polygons, but it exists on only one level of subdivision. So this mesh could be from another package, and we want to create or rebuild the lower levels of subdivision. You can see from the wireframe here it's quite a dense mesh. So I can take this object here, I'm just going to select it, And now underneath the Mesh menu, we can actually select Rebuild Subdivision Levels option here. This feature specifically works with Catmull-Clark subdivided meshes, and you can see that Mudbox is calculating the lower levels of subdivision that it can rebuild from the high-res mesh. A message bubble will pop up informing how many levels of subdivision it is able to rebuild. So in this case you can see we have 4. So we can now treat this model as any other and begin to sculpt on the lower levels, and those details will propagate up to the top original subdivision level. So you can see here that I can step down through the lower levels of subdivision that we've just rebuilt or recreated from the high-res mesh, all the way down to a new base mesh of 14,000 polygons. The Subscription Advantage Pack from Mudbox 2011 also brings a more powerful workflow with external applications. A common problem when working with a mesh in Mudbox is the desire to change the base topology of the model. So here I have some uneven edge loops that I'd like to fill in with some more detail. So I can quickly grab the model and then send it over to Maya. In Maya, I can alter the base of the topology, in this case by adding some new edges, and then refresh or update the mesh back in Mudbox. Exporting the mesh back to Mudbox prompts a selection window asking if I want to start a new scene, update the existing object, or import this object as a separate object within the scene. After updating the current object, I can see the changes to the topology accepted right up to the top level of subdivision. And if we start to step down in the levels of subdivision on the mesh, we can see that these changes are at the base level. So here's our base with the updated topology brought back over from Maya. Also new to the Subscription Advantage Pack is the ability to transfer details between objects. So here I have a high-resolution armor plate, and I want to transfer the details to a simple base mesh of about 290 polygons. Under the Mesh menu, we now have a Transfer Details option. In here we need to define the target mesh, the source mesh, and our source distance between the two meshes. After the transfer is complete, I'm just going to hide the original mesh here. And we can see that it not only has the top level of detail from the original model, but that it now has all of the original sculpt layers as well. So any of these details, any of these sculpt layers from the original mesh will transfer over to this target mesh here, this base plate of armor. A handy feature in the Mudbox sculpting workflow is the ability to freeze details to prevent any further changes. So here I have this chest plate detail on a separate layer, and I don't want to affect this area with any further sculpting. The Subscription Advantage Pack from Mudbox 2011 now allows artists to freeze details based off of specific layers. So these specific details are now defined as frozen, and that'll prevent me from accidentally altering the details as I continue to sculpt the rest of the model.
Thanks for watching.